and welcome back to the channel. You may or may not have noticed that I missed a wrap-up along the way over the last couple months, so I'm here to actually bring you 2 months worth of wrap-up. We're talking about my April and May reads. So kicking off with books I read in April, the first one was an audiobook, which was Invasion of the Tierling by Erica Johansson, one of those two, which is the second book in the Queen of the Tierling series. If you watched my opinions on Queen of the Tierling, the first book in the series, I absolutely adored it and loved it, and it's like one of my favorite fantasies of all time now. However, with the second book in the series, I wasn't quite as enraptured. The second book starts in a way where I thought that I had the wrong audiobook. I thought that I had clicked on the wrong thing, and I was really confused for a little bit. And I thought that, okay, well, I guess we're never talking to our previous characters, because there was like this weird massive time jump, at least it seemed like it. I don't know, it was weird. And I didn't know what was going on, and I was like, oh, so all the people I fell in love with in the first book I don't get to ever see again? And that was not the case. It got explained, but it was a very jarring introduction to a book. And there was something about this one that just didn't have the same charm as the first one. I didn't enjoy the interactions between characters quite as much. I don't know, there was just a magic to it that I didn't connect to quite as much as I did with the first book. That being said, I'm still really interested in the world that this trilogy has set up. I think it's fascinating. I think it's really unique and interesting, and I'm really interested to see how it plays out in the third and final book in the series. So I do plan on continuing and finishing the series, but this book was a little bit of a letdown for me. The second book I read in April was actually a historical fiction, which are very hit or miss for me, and that was Homegoing by j.r.r, and I read this for a readathon. Alphabathon. That's the one I read it for. I have a whole reading blog if you want to go check it out that definitely details my thoughts a lot more. But ultimately, I had trouble with this book because you're following multiple different characters over a long period of time. It's these two sisters, half-sisters, who have descendants through time, and the different ways that both of these families have ended up in their drastically different circumstances, which is interesting, but I found that only spending little bits of time with each character and each of their little stories, I never fully connected to the characters and I never really got invested in them, so I wasn't that impacted by things that happened to them. Of course, they were still like horrible, awful, sad things a lot of times, but it didn't have that emotional impact that you would expect if you were following a character from beginning to end. You were really only getting these little slice of life pieces, which I think can be done well, and I think that is the thing that a lot of people like, but I just personally found it not quite as fulfilling as I would have liked it to be. With that being said, it is still a very important story. It is following people who started out in Ghana in very poor circumstances and kind of the different directions that you can go in coming from that kind of background. And it did teach me a lot of that area and a lot of the history of that area. However, this is a fictional book, so I'm not sure how much of that is accurate. I haven't put in the research to look into that, but it is written by someone who is also from Ghana. So I'm just not sure, and it just didn't resonate with me quite as much as I would have liked. Next up, I read Lady Midnight, or should I say reread Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare. This is the first book in the Dark Artifices series, and there are 3 books in the series, and the third one came out in January of this year. I pre-ordered it, I own it, it's over on a shelf over there. So I wanted to reread the series before I read the third one, and I forgot how frustrating this book is. I think I've outgrown Cassandra Clare, to be honest, and I'm sad about it, but you know, it was a time in my life, I can appreciate it, I can like it, or maybe it's just a series, I don't know, because I remember loving this book when I first got it, for the most part. So, let's talk about Cassandra Clare things for like a minute. If you don't like love triangles, or will they won't they relationships, or forbidden romances, don't pick up a Cassandra Clare book. Don't do it. You'll be frustrated through the entirety of it. This has all 3 of those things in it. The will they won't they definitely got to me in this. Like, it's just really dragged out. This is a very long book for you to just sit in that for like the entirety of it. And I also am just tired of the forbidden romances, especially from the Mortal Instruments series, which I feel like it's not a spoiler at this point, but it like fakes you out on one of those, so I don't trust forbidden romances anymore. I'm like, is it really forbidden? Are you just gonna throw in a wrench to make me think that it's okay in a few books? Because if so, I don't go through the emotional roller coaster the same because of that. It's kind of like Cassandra Clare has cried wolf too many times for me. With that being said, the overall plot of this, like the actual mystery that's happening in this book, I loved. I thought it was really interesting and really well put together. It's more the pacing that I had issues with and the focus on these romance aspects that I'm like, can we get that out of the way and go back to the interesting plot that you're setting up that has ramifications and implications across the entire Shadowhunter world? Can we go back to that, please? So that was just frustrating for me. I just found this ill-balanced for my personal taste, but it's a Cassandra Clare novel in the Shadowhunters world, so like, what do you expect? I don't know. I still enjoyed it, not as much as I remembered enjoying it originally, and I'm still interested to finish the series because, like I said, I really do enjoy the plot of this, just not so much the interpersonal parts. Then I read On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. I have read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I own a copy of it, and I absolutely love it. It's a 5-star read for me. And On the Come Up, I think, is an excellent follow-up to that story. I think it shows a different side of the community that we're introduced to in The Hate You Give. In fact, this is set in a neighborhood very close to The Hate You Give, so it actually references a lot of the events that happen in the first novel by Angie Thomas. But On the Come Up is following our main character, Bree, who has aspirations to become a rapper just like her late father. And it is a lot of these struggles that she has growing up in like the hood area of town and just dealing with the reputation of being a rap god's daughter and just the different alliances she has to make along the way and the things that she has to discover about herself and her community. And I really loved this book. I think that the way the characters all connected to each other were really great. I actually really enjoyed the romance in this. Who am I? And I really enjoyed the rap parts of this. I'm not a person who really enjoys rap music personally. It's not really my taste, but the lyrical aspects of this book were fascinating. And I think the fact that Angie Thomas has a history of rapping, it's something that she enjoys and she does do, really brought a lot of authenticity to this book. And I just really enjoyed those pieces of it. I think it was a really enriching piece of the book. Overall, it's definitely one that I would recommend, especially if you enjoyed The Hate You Give. And next up, I have another reread on my list, and that is Nosferatu by Joe Hill. I read this back in, I want to say 2016 on audiobook, and since the TV show recently started on AMC, if you're not watching, you should be, I really wanted to dig back into the book, and I actually am doing a whole book-to-movie adaptation series around this novel over on my other channel. I will link it up in the corners and down below for you guys if you're interested. But this is a horror novel by Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son, if you're not aware. And this is my favorite horror novel of all time. It has such an interesting premise. It has such compelling characters. It has such a good ending. It's just 5 stars all around. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this, it is a play off of Nosferatu the Vampire. However, this has supernatural sci-fi elements. It has a lot of interesting things in it, but basically Vic McQueen is a character who has an encounter with a villain named Charles Manx who kidnaps her as a child, essentially, kind of, and he's kidnapping kids and we don't know what he's doing with them, but it's implied that it's very sinister, and she manages to escape him and then become an adult and then have to re-encounter him and deal with the effects of that and her special abilities to combat him and to defeat him. And I just cannot rave about this book enough, especially if you like horror or if you enjoy Stephen King. This has a lot of flavors of Stephen King. It has Easter eggs of Stephen King books if you enjoy that, which you should, I hope, if you're a horror person. Overall, please, please, please go read this book. Please go watch the show. It's on AMC every Sunday night currently, and I believe you can sign up for their like subscription service, and the entire season's out already. I'm not paid to promote this. I just really love it and want it to be supported so it can continue. And in a massive genre shift, the next book I read was audiobook, and that was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I am fairly certain I read this as like a preteen young person at some point, but I don't remember a lick of it. And I know that the new adaptation of the movie is coming out, I believe, later this year, maybe November. Don't quote me on that. So I wanted to reread it. It was available on audiobook. I thought, why not? This is another one of those slice of life books that don't really have an overarching plot to them, which I just don't enjoy. Personally, I love plot-heavy books, and I love like overarching big plots in books. It's why I love sci-fi and fantasy so much. But this book follows, you know, these group of sisters who are just living life and learning about life and learning things about themselves and just going about their lives. Slice of life. Have I mentioned life a lot? So basically we just get these little tidbits of their lives as we're going along, and there's just no running plot through it. So I found myself disconnected and waiting for things to happen like the whole book, and then it never did, which was kind of sad. I mean, obviously things happen, but no like super impactful things. I don't know. I was pretty bored by it. It was okay. I do think that the writing is beautiful, and I really like the characters themselves. I think that they're very interesting and very varied characters, and they're all stand out in such a unique way to each other. Like there's not too much blending between them. They all are very much their own individual people. So I really like the writing of this book. It's just the plot that doesn't really interest me. Next up, I finally finished a series. I am currently in the middle of like 17 series, so to knock one off my list that I have was kind of a nice feeling. And it was a series that was particularly grueling to get through, and that is the Lord of the Rings series. I finally finished Return of the King back in May, and I'm so glad I'm done with the series, to be honest. I think that the world building in these books are excellent. I think that the characters are compelling. I really like all of the work that j.r.r. Tolkien has done for the fantasy genre, but the books themselves, it didn't hold my attention. It was really hard for me to read through these books in whole sittings, and not like the whole book in one sitting, but to focus on this book for more than 2 minutes at a time was really difficult for me, which is ultimately why I switched to audiobooks on these. The second and third books I did on audiobook, which helped me get through them a lot better. However, that being said, the audiobooks available at my library were the BBC radio productions of them, which made them very short and didn't have a lot of the descriptions in them that Tolkien is famous for. And so I feel like I didn't get a full experience of the books. And I honestly don't think I'll ever return to them to do that, because the first book that I read physically just took me so damn long, and I was bored by it, and I didn't enjoy it as a reading experience personally. I think it's also just hard because the movies are works of goddamn art, and the movies are excellent and wonderful, and I just found the books to be lacking in comparison, even though I know that they're the source material. I have a lot of complicated feelings about it, but it's over, we're done. I don't have to revisit. And the last book that I read in May was another audiobook, and it was a nonfiction, which is In Order to Live, A North Korean Girl's Journey to Freedom by Yeonmi Park. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but this is about, just like it says, a woman's escape from North Korea, which of course is a very oppressive country, and it's very hard to get out of with your life. And I found this story to be so educational, and the perspectives that this person has on the experiences that she went through were really unique and interesting and heartbreaking. So many trigger warnings for all the things in this book, you know, abuse, sexual abuse, just lots of things. It was really hard to read. I did it on audiobook, which helped. And I just think it was really good if you're interested in this kind of perspective and personal story. I do recommend this. I think it's excellently written and a very good perspective and a very well told, and it's still engaging. And it has uplifting parts of it, so it's not all depressing throughout the whole thing. I just really overall enjoyed the reading experience, and I enjoyed learning about this piece of someone's life that's very, very different than mine. And that's actually going to wrap up my April and May wrap up. So I hope that you enjoyed. I hope you learned some things about these books. I hope I convinced you to read Nosferatu. That's really just the whole goal of this video. And please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe if you want to see more. I'm trying to be more consistent. I feel like I've said that in my last like 6 videos, so that should just be the theme of my channel. I'm trying to be more consistent. We're working on it, so stick around, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!